I'm John Egan. We're sitting in my living room in Moortown, Vermont.
John, maybe you can tell us how you fit into your family, your childhood. What was your family like?
I had a big family, big Irish family in Boston. It was really fun. My mom was one of 8. My dad was only one of 2, but we had plenty of cousins around. My grandfather had 30 grandchildren. So I was one of 30 grandchildren that all lived right in the same little neighborhood there in West Roxbury. It was pretty cool. I'm the 3rd from the oldest of 8 kids.
So, how how did your parents manage to pass skiing on to 8 kids?
You know, with 8 kids, it was 7 of us survived. It was, a long time ago, but they really loved to ski, and they would go skiing up to Mount Cranmore, the old ski mobile, once a year. So you couldn't go on the ski trip unless you could ski. So how do you learn to ski if you can't go skiing? Well, you play in your backyard. I used to drag snow out of the mobile station at the end of Richwood Street, and I'd drag it up to my backyard every day after school till I had enough to pile up against the picnic table. And I skied in my backyard. I had about 30 feet before I hit the chain link fence. And I practiced all the time. So when I did finally get to go up to Mount Cranmore, it was really cool. I got to, wow, a mountain and a lift and all that stuff. It was fun.
Well, did you guys ski in Massachusetts at all?
We did. We skied at Blue Hills in Milton, Massachusetts, where we eventually ended up living in Milton. During high school, there was lots of ski hills around back in the day in Boston. So Boston Hill, Prospect Hill. So we skied all around the Boston area, but the best skiing was right in our backyard. When we moved to Milton, we lived on a hill. So we skied down that hill, and it was really fun. And it was a sledding hill, so it was always fun, sleds going and jumps built. It was just a fun terrain park.
Now, did your older siblings ski too?
Yes, they did. Both my brother and sister skied, and they helped me. And my brother ended up being a patroller at Norwich University right here across the mountain where he went to school. And my sister still skis, and her grandchildren are learning to ski, and it's great. I love it. We all still ski as a family. It's fun.
Any vivid memories of those early trips to Cranmore, or did you go to Sunapee too? Or?
We did go to Sunapee. Sunapee was later after Cranmore, and I think the Cranmore trip stopped. I think I was the last child to go there. We joined a ski club shortly thereafter, Blizzard Ski Club it was called. I think it's a Mass Ski Club now. And we got in a bus and went up to Mount Sunapee every day. And that's where my dad volunteered as a supervisor on the bus to keep the kids under control. Good luck. And yeah, we'd have 40 kids on a bus, and there'd be 5 or 6 buses right there in the parking lot. And it was well organized. There was lessons every day. And you were pretty watched all day. It wasn't like a free-for-all, but it was really fun. And those memories, I can remember that the Flying Goose at Sunapee was always the steepest, most mogulled run. You always wanted to get to ski on that. But I really remember the instructors being so thoughtful and caring, and they'd remember your name, and they just loved skiing. And it was really fun. Usually we had the same instructor almost every weekend, so it was really nice to get to know them. And they saw, like, wow, this kid wants to jump off every rock and little stump they have. And back then there was a little crossed bamboo pole on every rock and jump, so you weren't supposed to jump off it. But they were pretty free with the kids and how to learn, and as long as you could do the stem Christie or whatever they happened to be teaching you that day, you could have fun.
Well, it's good continuity, isn't it? I'm the same instructor, and a good base. Now, I'm surprised how you ended up in Vermont. I mean, Boston is closer to New Hampshire. Everybody sort of went up that corridor. What got you over across the river?
It's interesting. When you live in Boston, you do ski New Hampshire most of the time. It was 1976. The tall ships were in Boston. I was working at a restaurant in Boston, and I ended up getting fired that night, which was the best thing that ever happened to me. My buddies and I went to Cape Cod. We had a long, long evening, night. Maybe it was morning when most were still sleeping. And I was wandering around on a boat dock, and I saw a guy getting on a boat by himself and rigging up his sailboat by himself. And I learned to sail in South Boston as a child. My dad loved to sail, so I kind of knew how to sail. And I said, "Hey, you going out by yourself?" He said, "Yep." He had a Hanson ski hat on. I said, "I see you like to ski. I love to ski. I'm going to be a ski bum. I'm out of high school now. I'm going to go to Utah. They have the best snow in the world. That's where I'm going to go." He said, "You want to be the best skier or you want the best snow?" I said, "Well, I don't know. I guess the best skier would be cool." And, "Well, you better go to Sugarbush then. That's where all the best skiers are." And he ended up to be Lou Anderson. He was the accountant. He ran the firm that did Sugarbush's accounting. So he said, you ought to go to Sugarbush. And he took me sailing, and we had a great time. He introduced me to Trod Fortner, who ran the Golden Horse Lodge. And as you know, Trod's wife, Lixie, was third in charge at the mountain back then. And so it was Damon, Jack, and Lixie kind of ran the place. And boy, I shoveled Lixie's, door stoop every morning and took care of her dogs and, lived there at the lodge and, really was embraced by the whole Sugarbush family. I was blown away being a kid from Boston who was used to, the toughness of the neighborhood and things. This place was welcoming, and they wanted me to ski better. They said, "Hey, you're pretty good, try this." And it was such a warm, fuzzy feeling. I couldn't leave.
Now the Fortners had a daughter too on the U.S. ski team.
The Fortners had Rosie Fortner, who was on the U.S. ski team, and Trod was so proud of her. He talked about her every day, and I knew I was really being cared for when he'd pull out her old downhill skis and wax them up and fit the bindings to my boots and say, "I'm going to disrupt the Sugarbush downhill. We're going to put you in it, and you're going to win." And he put me in there, and that was against Siggy Grottenhofer and Hartmut Helmstreet and all the Austrians. And I had Rosie's Olympic alu steel skis on my feet. And I got gold medals and silver medals and bronze medals all year. And Trod was teaching me how to, go faster than the other guys and watching the races. And it was just really a fun time.
He was such a jolly guy.
He was. Trod was a really happy guy, a good influence for a young ski bum. That, you're doing the right thing in life, you're following your passion, you can live to be an old happy man doing this your whole life. It was really a great thing, and I loved working for the both of them, really.
Well, and there was a lot of Austrians in the valley. I was at Mad River and Dixie Knoll Ski School at the time. I taught there for 12 years.
The great thing about the Austrians that were here, a lot of them drank in the pub at night. And I was, coming down to get the dirty dishes out of there. And they would all make comments. And one, well, you probably remember Wayne Schneider, I'm sure. Wayne and Pepe Reich were sitting in there. And they were kind of joking about me skiing the mall right under the Valley House that day. And I said, "Oh yeah, but it was icy." And they looked at me and they laughed, and they took a nickel off the bar and they tipped over their beer bottle and they tapped it. They said, "Is that glass harder than the ice?" And I said, "Yep." Well, he balanced that nickel on the side of the bottle with his finger. And he said, "With balance, you don't need edges." And I was like, "Oh, okay." Pretty funny. So I got advice all over. It was a great place for a young guy, girl, anybody that wanted to be a skier to work.
Boy, you entered those races, and were the ski bum races too?
There were ski bum races and everything also, yeah. And the ski bum races were side by side. It was a dual racing format, and you switched gates. And that was my advantage to beat the band above everybody. Even though these guys were much better skiers than I grew up spending most of my weekends at New England Dragway. I raced go-karts that went over 60 miles an hour when I was 10 years old, 11 years old, and 12 years old against someone else. And you had to be lightning fast when the Christmas tree went down with the lights and the starting. Because the takeoff, the start was half the race. So I got really good at it. By the time I was 13, I had a motorcycle that did over 115 in the quarter mile. I ended up with drag bikes and eventually a pro stock Mustang with a 429 in it, and you know, did 11s, high 10s, 11s in the quarter mile. Really fun stuff. So I had been pitched next to somebody who was going to try and beat me, and I was trained for that. So that the ski bum races were great, because I was going to get out ahead of you and mess with you the whole way down because I'm in front of you. It was really fun. And that led to the pro circuit. When the pro circuit came around, and do you remember they had those horse gates that opened up? That was, boom, I was gone every time. It was, you know, wasn't the best racer, but I was on the winning team every year. It was pretty cool.
So yeah, talk about the pro racing. How did you, you remember how you got hooked into that? I mean, you did both the Peugeot and the Saab, so those two different kinds of races.
They are. The Peugeot was a dual race pro format with the jumps in it, 2 jumps, and the Saab was a pro mogul, also with 2 jumps, but on a mogul course. And the pro circuit came to Sugarbush, and I was winning the ski bum races and beating some of the guys that I know were going to sign up for it. So I signed up for the Peugeot race and did pretty good and just kept signing up. I was lucky to have people that believed in me, and the company Rosano was very excited, put me on their race team, and I had a nice ride right from the day one. So it was really good. And back then there was lots of those pro races. There was a bunch that were down at Hunter, put on by Penthouse magazine. There was all sorts of ways you could make money just by beating other people. It was pretty fun.
So did you hang out, you know, with, I mean, it was pretty much a local tour, though, on the East Coast that you were experiencing then. How about freestyle? Was that creeping into your, did you know any of the freestyle guys in those days? You know,
I remember the freestyle. You know, it started in New Hampshire, Waterville Valleys. They kind of call that the birthplace, right? So I had heard of the freestyle. Jumpin' Jack Turner lived here at Sugarbush. Alan Schoenberger, who was the mime who did ballet, was at Sugarbush. So, you know, I had access to watching these guys, and they'd ski with their Astro Tunes. I don't know if you remember they were like a cassette player that fit on your chest with yellow earphones and all that. And I watched them ski, and I'm a very visual learner. So as I watched people, I would, you know, pick up on what they were doing. Puppy, you want to?
Come over here. Come. Get your toy.
I can let her out if we have to.
Want to get your toy?
Batu, go with the mama. Oh. What's Mama got for you? You know, it's interesting with the with hanging out with those guys, because really hanging out with the racers turned me off to racing. So being a visual learner, I'd go to these racers and they'd be the best in the world or the best in our area, and you know, if you won the East, you get to race the West and all that cool stuff. So I'd watch these guys and I'd follow them. And I had one guy that was really good, and I followed him, and he stopped at the bottom. He says, "Get away from me, kid. What are you following me for?" And it was this closed society, and I was used to the Sugarbush way that I learned, where they were sharing their knowledge with me. I was invited into Denise McCluggage's centered skiing and the racing clubs, all these things. And all of a sudden, these racers on the pro circuit were very closed-minded. They didn't want you to know their tricks or whatever, how they were going to beat you. And that kind of pushed me more towards the moguls, which is why I went into the Saab Pro Mogul Tour. And that was a lot less like that, but it was still a competition where it wasn't all friendly. You know, in my first ski film, I was with all of the same people, and everybody was having a great time. They were cheering each other on. They weren't bummed that you got a better shot than them or you had a better run. It was a whole different camaraderie thing. So I'm kind of a team player, and I was turned off from both the types of competition. I did them for 3 years and really enjoyed it, and it honed my skills, and I could still learn from watching, but it wasn't the camaraderie that I was looking for in the industry.
Wow. Jumping back a little bit, what were the bush pilots? Ski mountaineers?
Jumping back, that's way forward.
Oh, is that forward?
Yeah, that's most recent.
Oh,
it
really?
is. Yep.
That's showing my ignorance.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, let's just jump forward.
All right, well, we'll jump forward. So, in the filming of, in my film career, I spent a lot of time at Squaw Valley and ran into Eric and Rob Delorier right from Bolton Valley, right over here. And it was nice to see another Vermonter out west. And
The same age as you?
roughly, I'm older than both of them, but they're pretty close in age, closer to my brother's age. He's 6 years younger. But we're all right in there. And so we formed these X-Team clinics. We worked for the North Face, and they had the North Face Extreme team. We made videos, and we decided that we loved sharing our knowledge, and we wanted to create a learning environment for those who wanted to learn how to ski off-piste. So we started the advanced ski clinics with the Extreme team, and we took people all over. They started right here at Sugarbush in Bolton Valley. We expanded through the whole U.S. I was just looking at a schedule last night that we had, and it was, Chamonix and Alaska and all over the world, which was great. We ran those for years, and it was really fun. And I was asked by one of the clients of the X-Team clinics, who owns a house here at Sugarbush, can't we do something like this local? There's no ski school that we want to go to that will take us as a group off-piste to above level 3 skiing and just let it work out as a fun day. And so we started the Bush Pilots here at Sugarbush, and all the coaches that I had were some of these kids I coached since they were 9 or 10 years old, and they went to GMVS, and I was their ski coach. A lot of them had similar careers. They were in ads, they worked for ski companies, they were reps, they've been in films, all sorts of things like that. So they all had a little specialty about them, but none of them were PSIA qualified. And that was one of the requirements the guests really wanted. They didn't want to get too technical with what I'm doing wrong, and they knew our feeling is that none of us walk the same. Why would we all ski exactly the same? There are some principles, yes, you need to have, but your turn is never going to look like my turn exactly. And the only way to do that is to make everything equal, and that's why you have ski racing on a groomed, hard surface and gates that are specific places. And then you can test who did what turn better or faster. If you're free skiing in the moguls or the powder or the woods, none of that matters. What matters is you had a good time, you didn't get hurt, you enjoyed yourself, and you felt better about what you did for the day. So with that principle, we started the Bush Pilots, a really successful program, and it was really fun to get national recognition for having this unique program, which I didn't think was that unique. It's like great skiers getting together to share comments on how to ski better for everybody. But yeah, that's the Bush Pilots, and it was a really, really good era to have.
Now, was that in the 90s?
So the Bush Pilots went up until the last year I was at Sugarbush with 17, 18. When did it close down? 20 was
For
COVID. So right up until that season. Yeah. Yep. Yep. It went, so it was 10 or 12 years before that, easy. Maybe 15. I could get you the exact dates on that, but.
Well, let's jump way back again.
Way back.
Way back.
The Wayback Machine.
how did you end up going west? What was your first going out west?
Well, going out west happened right after I came to Vermont. And I guess it was the second season I was here in Vermont. And it was a slow start to the season. We were climbing up the hill every night, and they started making snow on this area of Sugarbush called Gatehouse. And we would climb up and move the snow guns to where we wanted the snow, and would concentrate them all in this thing we called the waterfall, a really steep area. And then would hang out and drink beer and just hang out and watch. The snowmakers only came by every 3 to 4 hours. So we had a good 4 hours making snow where we wanted. They'd come by and they'd look everywhere but up. And we were up there. We'd climb a tower that had a chair near it, and would get out on a chair, would sit there, and they never looked up. And this was our MO. They'd move the guns, they'd look around, would come down when they left, would put them back where we wanted, would go home for the night. So by the time the mountain opened that year, early, I guess it was Thanksgiving. And can you hear? You're good? I don't know if you can hear her.
Yeah, I can.
Can you hear it on the mic?
Yeah.
Okay.
I can have her.
I can just tell her.
Yeah.
Jesus, I don't have my phone turned on. I'm trying to get out west, but we're making snow and you're hanging in the chair.
Right, so by the time the mountain opened that year, it was right about Thanksgiving, and we got up early in the morning, big powder day, and we climbed up to the top of Gatehouse where we knew that the snow underneath was really good, and we waited for the first people in line to come up the chair. And as they came up the chair, we skied down in that powder. And then we went over to the Valley House, and we waited till they opened that chair. And as the first people came up, we were skiing under their powder. Well, the guy who was in the first chair, who waited the longest in both lines, tracked us down. And he said, "Who are you guys? I want to ski with you." His name was Dennis Willett. And we skied with him. We became lifelong friends. We had the best winter. And at the end of the season, it was all melting. And he says, "Let's go out west." I said, "Dennis, I make $30 a week. I'm a dishwasher. I can't go out west. I got no money." He says, "You come work for me when we're done. I'll pay for your whole trip. I own an apple orchard. You can come work on it in upstate New York." I said, "Done deal." So we went out west. We went to Jackson Hole. We went to Snowbird. We went heli skiing. We just drove around the west. And the best part was, most of the time we weren't even at a resort. We'd be driving along the highway and see something and get out and climb and go ski this thing. So it was really, I loved being with this guy. It was fun. And when we drove back to New York, and he never took me back to Vermont. He wasn't going to let me get near here. We stopped in Oswego, New York, and he threw me the keys to a brand new tractor trailer. He said, "I just bought the thing, and my cousin, the driver, quit. Go learn to drive it." I had a lot of experience. I drove pickup trucks, dump trucks, in high school, so I was pretty used to double clutching and whatever. And I drove tractor trailers for 5 years for that guy. And it was wonderful. It was a great, we hauled produce, so I'd go to farms and go to a produce market and unload. So I loaded and unloaded the truck. I stayed in pretty good shape, and I made a lot of money. All my expenses were covered, and it really eased the winter stress of where's the money coming from. So it really changed my life. And Dennis and I still ski together to this day. Yeah, in fact, he wrote an article called Bush Madness that was in Powder Magazine in 1978, I think it was, about that day that we met. It was pretty fun.
When did you go back to the west? From then on, were you just hooked on the bigger mountains, or?
I was hooked on the bigger mountains, but my friends and my family were east, so I stayed here. But eventually, would get out there for a trip. I had filmed with Warren Miller here, so I was calling him all the time to see if he needed maybe a good eastern skier out west or in Europe. And just spent a lot of time trying to get back out west any way I could. Eventually, I went to Big Bear Lake, California. I had a job there, and it wasn't the job I wanted when I got there. So I went up to Squaw Valley and got a job there in the race department, and that changed my life. I was my girlfriend at the time. We pulled into the parking lot. She says, "I'm going to go look for a job." I said, "Okay, I'll put everything in the car so no one steals anything." The only thing that didn't fit in the car was my downhill skis. This is no good. I can't put these in the car. I can't lock them up. I better put them on. I better let her look for work, and I should go to the lift and ski. I got into lift, and I heard, "Hey, you're John Egan, aren't you?" I said, "Yep." He said, "Well, I'm Tom Day. I've watched you ski my whole life at Sugarbush, and I used to skip school to watch you, so welcome to my mountain. Let's ski." And I skied with Tom Day. He took me to the Eagle's Nest, my very first run at Squaw with 223s on. And I never looked back. And Tom and I are still skiing together to this day.
So that's how you met Tom.
Yeah.
Was he a filmmaker? Was he shooting film in those days yet?
Tom was not shooting film then. He was a skier. He was one of the skiers that helped put together the Vermont North Face Extreme Team. He wore North Face and worked with Tom Lane at the time, and Tom was the North Face rep. He was just a great skier and a really good guy to ski with. I still think he's one of the best skiers in the world that I've ever skied with, and I've seen a lot of them. But he became a cameraman, and it was a fun transition to do that because we all did it together. We would go on a film trip with Warren Miller and never come home. And we would just stay wherever he left us. Tom would pull out his old Bolex and would start making our own films after the Warren Miller cameraman would leave. So the first time we did that, we were in Val d'Isere, and we stayed for 3 months after the cameraman left. So it was really fun.
Speaking of cameramen, he had some real characters as cameramen in the early days. I don't know, Fletcher Manley comes to mind.
Yeah, so the first cameraman I ever worked with was Fletcher Manley out of Manchester, Vermont. And he was amazing to work with. He was quite a character. If anybody's met him, they know this, but he would say, "Okay, this is the run." He'd go up and look at Stein's run or the Mall or the FIS, whatever he wanted to film. He'd say, "Okay, this is it. You guys are going to ski. Don't stop. When you start, you're going to hear my whistle. When I whistle again, you stop." And then he would leave. And we'd all be standing around, and nobody had walkie-talkies. We didn't have a cell phone. We didn't know where this guy went. You couldn't see where he was. And you would hear this whistle, like, I don't know how he whistled so loud from so far away. And time to go. And we'd ski, and you'd hear a whistle, and you'd stop. And he'd be at the top of Gatehouse, filming Stein's run from across the valley. You know, it was amazing. But I really liked working with him. I liked how much of a character he was. We stayed pretty close over the years. I used to go down to visit him at his camera shop down in Manchester. And yeah, I filmed with him a couple times. Really, really a good guy. Don Berlin, who ended up being his director, was quite a character too. Don was a very funny, colorful character. And I think most of Warren's era team, his crew, they were all characters. I mean, Warren was a character himself, so they kind of probably all found each other in the way we do.
What is it? Warren really was. Did you feel like he was stepping? You were there for his transition where he really stepped away.
Yes, I knew Warren over many different iterations, and yes, he stepped away. That was a tough period, I felt. Warren cared for his skiers, and I know I'm not the only one that says this, but we felt like he treated us like his kid. And, you know, the first time he really stepped away there, his son had bought the company from him, Kurt, and they had some disagreements on how to run things, and eventually Warren was actually, as Warren says, I was thrown out of my own company. So Warren was really hurt by that. I know Kurt was hurt by that. I know the whole family had a tough time with that. But, you know, being from the old school of Warren Miller, we were brought in, you know, to still film with him. But things, you know, were different for sure. And I've watched that company go through so many different iterations, and it was really great to see him at the very end of his life get back into working with the actual Warren Miller Film Company. And it brought back more of the retro footage that he had taken, which was really cool. The last film I skied with him was called Future Retro, and that was so cool. Some of the oldest footage and some old school skiers with the new kids. It was really fun to do, and it was nice to see Warren get reconnected with his baby, if you will. In fact, we ended up making a documentary about Warren called Ski Bum, and we got the last interviews with Warren at his house in Washington. So that was really special to be involved in that, and I really felt like I was part of the crew doing that. Tom Day, my brother Dan, Scott Schmidt, Brad Vancour from Canada. We were all there together at Warren's house. You know, we were all able to choose our settings where we were interviewed, and I found this little shack where Warren stored all of the keys he ever stole from every hotel he was ever in, hanging on a pegboard thing. You opened up the cabinets and they were all in there. And this was a big floor-to-ceiling chest. I said, I want to be right in front of that. I kind of like that style. Yeah.
Well, you just brought up Scott Schmidt. Did you meet him that same season that you met Tom Day?
Yep. Squaw Valley was a great place to be a ski bum. And yeah, Scott Schmidt was one of Tommy's ski buddies, and soon I ended up skiing with him a bunch, and we were on the North Face Extreme team together. We did a lot of stuff together over the years, and yeah, I've skied with him in a lot of films. A lot of times not in the same segments, but the same films. And yeah, just got to ski with him again out in Big Sky. That was really wonderful to still ski with him and laugh about a lot of things.
Now, hosting, did you and your brother take over going on the tour and hosting? Because Warren used to host all his shows, but at this point he was, what, cutting back? Or was that after his son had actually taken over?
No, he had already cut back before his son took over. And I remember my first Warren Miller movie, I saw it up in Stowe. And he was sitting there with a little light aimed at a legal pad, handwritten narration for the film. If you knew Warren, you knew he really didn't need the narration. He could ad-lib and put in whatever he wanted. So later in life that made sense, you know, that he could just read off a sheet and get it done. But it was really, he liked the athletes to be there at the shows too. And like I said, when we'd go to a film location and we started making our own films, we started having our own tours. So we had Egan Entertainment Network and would show the film that Tommy had made with us. But then we're in the same towns as the ski shows, so we started going to the ski shows and narrating the Warren Miller movie. Or not necessarily narrating, because they were coming canned at this point, the narration was in there. But you'd introduce it and talk at intermission and, you know, get the crowd excited for it.
Yeah, and that was the big difference, wasn't it? When his soundtrack actually ended up on the film.
That was a big difference. It was one thing that there's nothing like a live narrated show. We started with slideshows, ended up with film, and even in those little arenas, you'd see the difference that people are so much more excited and engaged when someone from the film is there talking to them. And imagine the whole narration is from one of those people or the guy who made it himself. That's amazing. So that the connection that Warren was able to make with his audience was mind-boggling. And it was really a good lesson in life, really. You know, you need to connect with the audience or you're not making a product they're really going to connect with.
That probably goes to a ski area, too.
It really does. It speaks volumes to many ski areas.
So You'd been filming for Warren, both back here in the East to begin with and then out West. How did your brother get involved? How did he come into your picture? You've been in this 6 years ahead of him.
Yeah, you know, I'm 6 years older than my brother Dan, and when he was in high school, he'd go to the movie theater at BU and see his brother on a big silver screen, life-size, up there in a movie, and all he wanted to do when he got out of school was, you know, go do that. He had taken semesters off all through college and ended up skiing with my friend Dennis, and I would tag him along on trips out west, so he was very in tune to skiing at our level and having fun with that. So when he got out in '88, he came up to Sugarbush to work up here, and he got fired. And he said, actually, I got fired from GMVS for taking kids in the woods on a race day. Silly me. But he came home from work, and he says, how was work? I says, I got fired. He goes, oh, good, well, I'll go quit. Let's go out west. And I'm, all right, let's go out west. We didn't have really anything tying us here, so we just drove out west, and we did the pro mogul tours and things like that, which was funny for me to get back into competing again. We drove all the way to Squaw. We knew people there. We got a place to stay. Sometimes we would drive straight to Aspen on Wednesdays because they had a mogul contest. We knew we could take $500 home every time. I mean, we just drove around the West at these, you know, smaller events and went in and made our money. So Dan was involved right from the beginning. That was the year we started the North Face Extreme team. So it was a really good time to join the whole crew. So, you know, Dan, you know, was lucky enough to step right into a whole system that was there. So the whole North Face team was there. They loved the fact that they were brothers, the Delorier brothers, the Egan brothers. Eric Perlman was our producer. He really fed off that a lot. He really liked the camaraderie of that aspect. And yeah, you know, we started filming and skiing and racing and doing what we did as kids. Yeah, it was fun.
So what really constituted extreme skiing in those days? Not like now. I mean, maybe you can talk about that evolution a little bit. Also, you might throw in something about the equipment in 1988.
Yeah. You know, extreme skiing has been around since Sylvain Sudan. First one to ski the Himalayas. I have an unbelievable poster of one of his old movies down in my basement. I've met him over the years and skied with him over the years. He was my childhood hero. It was amazing. Him and Patrick Valençant, really famous extreme skier who really, Patrick knew how to market his skiing better than Sylvain, I think, and he made more films. I was lucky enough to meet Patrick Valençant in Chamonix. I was in Europe making a movie with Tom Day, and we were staying in Verbier, Switzerland, and we were with the stuntmen that were doing A View to a Kill. So it was John Eves and John Faulkner. It was just an unbelievable crowd there, and it was a whole Clomben kid with Mark Shapiro and Ace Cavalier. I mean, it was the rock stars of Powder Magazine of yore, and we were there skiing with them. It was amazing to us. The cameraman got hurt. He took off, went home. We drove to France. We left Switzerland, went to Chamonix, and stayed for 3.5 months. And that was my eye-opening to what that extreme skiing was. We were watching where Patrick would go, and we'd try and follow his routes, Tommy and I would. It was really cool, and you know, we didn't have ropes, we didn't have anything. We'd get the big Bertrams, we'd have to climb up and jump over them. And years later, he said, "How did you get over the Bertram?" And I said, "We climbed up higher and went faster and jumped." "You jump?" "We ski." I ended up wearing his clothes for many years in many films, you know, which was really cool. I worked with him right up until he died in '89, and he had sent us ski suits. And that pink ski suit that I wore that day saved my life many times over my career. It was really like a special suit for me. I wore it in the Avalanche in Warren Miller's film. I had it on when the cornice broke in a Warren Miller film. You know, it was just an amazing good luck charm, I guess. So the extreme skiing that I was exposed to was the original extreme skiing. It was death-defying. These guys were skiing things that if you fell, you died. If you didn't have a rope, if you didn't have ice axes, if you didn't have mountaineering skills, you weren't really good at this stuff. Tom and I didn't have a place to live in Chamonix, so we'd climb up and stay in the huts at night sometimes, and that's how we got our really good mountaineering experience. Albeit at night with not the right equipment, freezing cold, but we learned. So when extreme skiing got really big in mid-90s, I guess it was, and they started having contests and everything, I had mixed emotions about it because it's against man and mountain. It's not against man. And this goes back to when I wasn't comfortable with the competition of the racers. And I firmly believe your competition should be with yourself. And if you can do better the next time, that's great. I don't have to compete with you, because if I'm competing with you, my energy is thinking about you. I want my energy thinking about me. It's really, really important. So I was a little worried with these competitions that we're going to end up with a lot of people just trying to beat somebody else and jumping off a bigger cliff. I'd experienced this stuff in real life making movies with kids that were too competitive. My buddy Paul Ruff had to jump 163 feet. Who knows why? And because it was the biggest one. And whenever you'd be with someone that would say, what's your run? Oh, I'm going to jump off there. Oh, I'll climb up 5 feet higher and jump off both of those. I would back away from being with those people because they just wanted to push the limits further than what you were comfortable with. I've always believed that as a team, you can play at a higher level than you can by yourself, because you can push each other if it's a healthy push and it's a group mentality that gets in the zone and you can do it. It's why jazz musicians sound like they've practiced 100 years when they go off on a new riff. It's because they're in that zone, but they're in it together. It's not against each other. The guitarist isn't playing against the horn. It's a symbiotic relationship. So I was worried about that in the extremes. I ended up judging a bunch. I didn't want to be in them. I thought it was just not the right venue for me. But the organizers did a really good job, and it did a lot for extreme skiing. The main thing it did was it made equipment that made this skiing really fun. When you think about the original equipment we were on, our sponsors were going to the race room and giving us a nice pair of GS skis from the race room to go ski backcountry in Romania or Turkey. I mean, what's up with that? Have you ever tried to ski a GS ski in the powder when it's, you know, broken crust or mixed powder, or you got to jump 20, 40 feet? I mean, not the best ski to go with. And nowadays the equipment just makes all that stuff really fun. And you know, you can ski one ski quiver will get you through everything. We used to have a slalom ski, a downhill ski, a GS ski, and you know, a recreation ski. And now you could really have one ski and ski every day if you wanted. So I'm really glad the equipment caught up with the sport as it evolved.
Did it change extreme skiing? The equipment?
It really did. It really did. If you look at old school stuff with people, they're really hop turning, trying to get out of the snow. If you look at any of these big lines they're skiing in Alaska, these skiers are not in the snow. They're on the snow. And you get a ride on the snow and the surface. You're rarely in the substance. And so there's a lot more things you can ski like that, because you're not using energy to break up through the crust. You're not actually breaking through it. Or if you are, you're just leaving an indentation. So it changed a lot of things. I think it really changed how people turn. And that's a little sad for me. I love to turn. I think feeling that turn is what makes me want to ski more and more. I'm not a big fan of straight lining down something that's, you know, 2,000 vert. I could have got 2,000 turns on that thing. You know, like I want to enjoy it. And the straight lining doesn't do it for me as much. But It does allow, the new equipment does allow for that. So it definitely changed where we can go and what we can do. I think the fact that it's lighter now is really great. If you're mountaineering, a pound is a pound. You got to carry an extra pound up. You're not happy. So you can light, these boots that they have are so light. It's the combination of mountaineering and skiing has really become one. It's really nice.
Well, jumping back, avalanche. You've survived to this day, right? I mean, so you had an avalanche in '89. Was that something that just was triggered while you were skiing, or?
Yeah, that avalanche in '89 was in Mott's Canyon at Heavenly Valley. And I had jumped off a cornice and my brother was following me. And as I skied on the cornice, it broke off and landed on the snow before I hit the snow. So it broke up, my landing zone became a jigsaw puzzle that was moving as I was in the air. So luckily I could land a little side hill, and I kind of took my three extremities, uphill ski in the snow, and kind of kept myself as light as I could, and I went across the big chute and I dove myself on a rock. I broke 3 ribs and I held on for dear life, and the snow kind of went around me. I was very lucky to be at the top of the avalanche. I wasn't halfway down. There wasn't a ton of snow behind me to knock me over, and I was able to let it pass me for a little bit before I stopped. It continued all the way down to the Ponderosa Pines. And Warren followed it was Gary Nate that was filming it, and he followed the plume of smoke into the woods, went back up, Dan sitting on the cornice, and Warren says, "Now we're down to 1 Egan." That's how we ended the film. My poor mom got phone calls and all sorts of stuff. But to back up a little, the first time I was in Europe skiing, we were in Verbier, Switzerland, and there's a place called Champay, and I think it's one of the steepest lift-serviced areas you could go to. It's really, really amazingly steep. And we were with great skiers that knew avalanche safety, and we did all that we could to mitigate everything we could. And yet I got caught in an avalanche there with my buddy Tommy Day. And I hit a tree, and he was above me and was fine. And we learned a lot. But playing that close, when you had someone checking all these slopes, you just knew it was snowing too hard, coming down too fast. It's going to get dangerous. And we played too long that day. So my interest was piqued. I started studying and doing the courses and being with people that were mountaineers more than skiers, and learning what I could about what it was like to travel in the mountains, not just ski in the mountains. And that really changed my, my view and wanted me to be in charge and not let other people just say, "Oh, it's safe, go ahead." You know, I've been fooled by that before. So I was more in tune to what was going on around me and Mother Nature and what it was dealing. So I think in that respect, I've been lucky. I know that each mountain's different. Each area of the world is different. If I don't have a local guy that I can ask questions and he can tell me, "Oh, the prevailing wind this year was out of the north. Normally it's out of the east. So it loaded this side of the slope. It's a very different year." I won't know those things. So I need a local with information to help me be safe. I could be the best avalanche guy in the world, but unless I know a little bit of local knowledge, really, I'm starting from scratch. So I've always latched on to and given them all the credit to the locals that I've met, and I think that's kept me alive.
We should just mention the famous cornice that you and your brother, Grand Targhee.
Grand Targhee. The one question everybody asks, do you know that's the most sold shot Warren Miller has ever taken? 70 years of filmmaking. It's amazing. But Dan and I were skiing down the edge of a ridge, and it was up on a place called Mary's Nipple. Beautiful view of the Tetons. If you've ever been to Targhee, it's just a classic spot. And once again, local knowledge. We didn't have the local knowledge. The forecasters were the patrollers, and everything's stable and everything's good. Except for the fact that if you were there in the summer and you knew the terrain, the rock is a straight edge where there's a big cornice, yet there's a big indentation in the rock that's missing. So as we skied across that part, it broke. And that thing dropped about 900 feet. It had 3 of my brother's turns on it in front of me. I heard it breaking behind me. It sounded like you dumped a bunch of BBs in a big metal funnel. I mean, it just a ripping, and I know that noise. I've heard it before, sad but true. And I had enough time to lean back and use the tails of my skis as my tips went off the edge where it broke as a springboard. And as that thing dropped out from under me, I made this little airplane turn and got one ski back on the hill and dragged my other one with me as I kept going, and I chased my brother down. I'm yelling, "Get away from the edge, get away from the edge," because we were skiing so close to the edge of the cornice. He thought I was yelling Yahoo. He never stopped. Everybody's like, "How could you guys keep skiing after that?" I'm like, well, I was chasing my brother and he wasn't listening to me. It wasn't like a bravery thing. You know, when we got to the bottom, the cameraman hugged us. My brother's like, "What?" So it wasn't until we saw the film, when it was in the edit room that year in Sun Valley at our buddy Kim's house, that it really hit him what had happened. I was able to see the crack from both ends and the whole chunk of it leave. And it was pretty scary. But, you know, I owe my life there to Denise McCluggage and centered skiing back at Sugarbush in the 70s. And when we were in the centered skiing workshop, you meditated about shape and feel and speed, and you need to meditate about that and how to feel it. And then when you're out there skiing, you would think about that meditation. And I like to call it meditation through movement, and I do get in a little meditative state when I ski. And I'm so in tune to hearing, listening. It's one of the reasons I was always put in the back in the film segments, because I heard these things and I could tell there's something happening behind us, get out. So I really think because of my calmness when I'm skiing at that high rate of speed, I can hear these things. And being a teacher and bringing people to really crazy extreme spots all over the world, some of the most remote parts of Kamchatka or Greenland or Antarctica, people's freak out level, long before they get to freaking out, they stop listening. They stop hearing. You take away one sensory mode of a human and they slow down all of their movements. They can't work as well. And so if I have a scared skier and we're on something dangerous, we have to get that person calm, or we have to get them off there in a calm way, because it's just not going to work well. So I really owe a lot of still being around, as you put it, to learning how to be calm when you're skiing. And that's helped me save my life. It's helped me save others' lives. I've been really lucky with that. I bring it right back to centered skiing.
Well, that goes back to what you're trying to teach as an experience. You have a philosophy that you try and impart through ski instruction, right?
Mm-hmm. I do. I really have a philosophy. People joke, they call it Egan School of Gravitational Enhancement. You know, I just think it's all about the feel, and it's feeling the turn. And I think you can take a highly athletic person, they can be intelligent and smart, and you put ski boots on their feet and you've locked one of their joints up, they can hardly walk. And you watch a real great tennis player in ski boots trying to get to the lift for the first time in his boots, or from the car to the lodge. It's pathetic almost, unless you've walked in ski boots your whole life. You know, and even then, still, we all look a little awkward when we walk in our boots. But most people can play tennis, they can play baseball, they can swing a bat, they can, you know, hit a ball, throw a ball, and we're not afraid because we live in a flat world. And skiing's not about a flat world. There's nothing flat about skiing. Our minds, in the way I think, your peripheral vision adjusts your balance, your up, down, your left, right, your agility according to 90 degrees to the flat surface, right? So Egan's law of perpendicularity is the brain has to be 90 degrees to however steep your playing field is. Otherwise, your brain doesn't work like it used to. So you're really athletic. You can swing a club. You get on something steep, you're like, oh my goodness. Most people, when they're afraid, do three things. One of the three or all of the three. They open up, they back up, and they stop moving. Ah! They've stopped their breathing. They've stopped their thinking. They've stopped their muscles. So we spend all of our lives, and you hear it in the ski class all the time, lean forward, lean forward. You don't tell someone to lean forward when they're playing tennis. If they were leaning back and falling down, you'd check them for a head injury. You wouldn't try and correct that. If people fell over every time they threw, what's wrong with this person? They can't stand up. Yet, when they're falling backwards when we're skiing, we're like, oh, you got to lean forward. We forget the fact that their brain doesn't know how to work when it's not perpendicular to how steep it is. If you can get the brain to play that game and calm down that, you can probably listen to a couple of tips that I could give you. So now you're really putting it all together and you're able to try the tip. When we watch most people learn to ski, they can't hear what I'm telling them. They can't hear what you're telling them, especially if it's your spouse or your kid. Please, they're like, well, of course you can do it. You're good. I can't do that yet. That's their first thought. But they also don't try to get in a mental state where they can hear what you're saying. And so I think that's the most important part of it, is you need to get to know the person and know how to calm them down and then talk to them about where their mind is, really.
So, looking back, any special moment that just really rocked your soul skiing? I'm sure there's many.
There's so many, I've been so lucky in my life to ski powder so deep you needed a snorkel. From the top of a peak to the ocean's edge, in Greenland, in Antarctica. Like, there's so many moments where I just appreciate this earth and that I get to see these parts of it. It's just mind-boggling. I guess one of the most memorable trips and some of the coolest experiences were in '92, I was invited to go to the peninsula of Kamchatka, which, if you've ever played Risk, it's the largest nuclear naval base in Russia. And it is when you want to win Risk, you capture Russia and the Kamchatka Peninsula. Then you can rule the world, But I was invited by a colonel who loved to ski. And he saw one of my videos when he was buying heavy equipment in New York City. The translator that he used had one of my videos. And he said, who's this guy? And they tracked me down. I was skiing out west. The guy wanted to meet me. I said, fly out. I knew the owners of the mountain. They put this guy up, and we skied waist-deep powder. And this colonel was blown away. He says, you must come to Russia. And I had been to Russia prior, climbing Elbrus in 1990. So, of course, I wanted to go back. And I did. And I was there for a bunch of time with just the translator and myself and this Russian colonel. We tested different pilots and who we wanted to fly with, and then the film crew came in for a couple weeks at the end, and we made a great film. But there's 127 volcanoes on this peninsula. 22 were active when I was there. You can look around the room and see them that I have here. So it's 38 below. It's freezing cold. I'm on a mountain that's a glacier, and yet there's lava pouring out of the left side of the mountain, and it's so hot you can't get near it. I mean, it was just a frozen Jurassic Park that was full of nature. It's undeveloped there. It's a military zone. So there's nobody there but the military base. And it was just an amazing experience. And to test the pilots, we would go meet a crew, and there's 3 members of a Mi-8 helicopter crew. And so we'd go meet them and would have breakfast with them. And then we'd go fly, and they would drop me off on a mountain. 14,000, 15,000 10,000 feet by myself. They would fly to the bottom and they'd set up white tablecloths and silverware and a lunch to beat the band, and they'd watch me through the scopes of their guns as I skied. Very unsettling, I will tell you. But to be on a 14,000 foot peak where you can see the ocean and to be able to ski it by yourself is just a privilege. You know, you could die tomorrow after that. And I got to do it for weeks. So I was very lucky, and that was just an amazing experience. And yeah, very, very special.
Oh, that's great. Amazing. Good tales.
Yeah, I got lots of good tales.
Well, you know, we'll try and, no, I think you did capture it. You captured a lot there.
Oh, good.
That was really good.
Well, thank you.
That concept of
A lot of money.
Yeah.
So, you know, we had pretty wealthy people who know everything come with us. And take a wealthy guy that's developed his own business and been very successful, and he knows everything, and everybody in his world listens to him, and he paid to go up on this volcano, and he's not listening to you, and you got to send him home because he's freaking out. You know, I've had, you know, owners of huge multinational companies that you would know the names of freak out on the side of a mountain and not be able to move. Taking me 2 hours to talk to him just to get him calm enough to move again. So there's a lot of psychology in there. And, you know, watch people when they ski. You know, the chairlift is an amazing spot. Most of them aren't moving. They move their arms, or they bend their knees, or they bend their waist. Few of them work as a unit. If you just bend your knees when you're standing there, you will fall on your ass, right? You can't run, jump, dance, or skip without using your whole body. If your leg length does not, your body length, in fact, does not shorten and lengthen, you are not doing anything. You are not changing the pressure on your ski. And, you know, we have it easy when you're just in gravity, right? I weigh 150 pounds, for example. I will always weigh 150 pounds. So how do I release, create, or decrease, increase or decrease the pressure on my ski if I'm always 150 pounds? I have to use math. I have to use physics. I have to understand what physics are. I'm making a turn, right? So, you know, it takes longer for your skis to go down the hill than it does your body, if you think about it. Your body's a straight line. Your skis are creating the dollar sign, you know, that you're making on the way down. So if I'm maintaining speed, and you see it really good in the World Cup, it's really cool. When they go by the gate, these guys are just crunching up. I mean, Michaela Schifrin, to watch her she's just a tiny little thing, and then she's a tall thing. It's so cool, changing body length. So if I weigh 150 pounds, and I'm extending my body, at the top of that extension, I've like jumped. I'm zero.
Right.
I weigh nothing. Awesome. You know, at the bottom, when I'm compressing and I'm stopped compressing and I start to extend, it's a head-on collision. I'm 300 pounds of pressure. Go ahead, that ski is not skidding, right? It will bend. I will get more power than I have because I use physics. And, you know, you can ski faster and smoother and better than everybody else out there because you're moving. And, you know, one of the first things I do with people is make them move any way you want when you ski. Go ahead. Flail your arms, twist your things. No movement's wrong. But when you do a wrong movement, you realize you don't like that feeling. We're sensation-based beings. How often do you take the frying pan out of the oven without an oven mitt? Once. Right? You learned that.
Maybe twice.
For some of us, there's a third time. Oh, the professional bikers teaching ratios with the gear shift, right? The professional baseball players teaching velocity and how he changes it with his pitching, you know. So, and I was able to do the ski part, you know. So it was really a neat thing. It was it's a video thing, if you can imagine.